Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Okay, everybody, picture this. It's 2 a.m. in a Stanford dorm room. A 21-year-old student, is crafting an email that would change his life forever. The subject line reads, "The investment opportunity of a lifetime." Within hours, he'll have raised nearly $1 million for his cryptocurrency hedge fund. Within minutes, this cautionary tale is more than what we might expect. It actually gave someone the every advantage society could offer. Here at Authors on Mission, we're going to dive deep into the stories that shape not just books, but lives, and this is one of them. And I'm so excited to welcome Dean Patrick's memoir, God Money, Lost and Found in the Crypto Wilderness, because it doesn't just tell a story, it holds up a mirror to all of us who've ever believed that external success could fill eternal voids. So today we're going to be talking about, his whole journey from Stanford's manicured lawns, Nepal's mountain peaks, to crypto riches, to Zen meditation cushions. It's going to be a great conversation about all this in addition to the writing process. So buckle up. We're going to explore what happens when someone tries to serve both God and money and discovers you can't do both. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Dean A. Patrick.
Thank you, Danielle. Great to be here.
It's great to have you on. I'm really looking forward to chatting more about your journey and your story. So would you please share a little bit about how you went from, wanting to be a Christian missionary to launching a crypto hedge fund at Stanford? It's a huge transformation. And then, of course, from that to being an author as well. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I grew up in a Christian family. I was actually homeschooled. And so I had two older brothers, right? And we were a traditional Christian family in a lot of ways. Went to church on Sunday, did Bible study. That was our entire value system, was really derived from the Bible. And it was the water I swam in. And I had a mentor, Pastor Larry, growing up, who was the youth pastor, and I wanted to be like him. And I went on some youth mission trips to Chile and Eastern Washington, and just fell in love with the whole process of getting people to come over to Christ, right? There was this incredible value system where, there was an eternity of well-being that awaited you if you accepted this doctrine. And to me, even as a 10 or 11-year-old, I was thinking, why would this life even matter? We have an eternity waiting for us, right? So that was my value system. Then in early adolescence, or 13, 14, it changed, right? I had some bodily desires come online that were in conflict with Christian morality, I would say. There was a sense of limiting freedom that came from the Ten Commandments and from Christian morality. And I began to view my life as something that I wanted to have the maximum experience with, right? I wanted to experience everything that one could experience in life, right? Travel, reach the highest height of business as I understood it as a 13-year-old. And then my older brother leaving the church and having this very rational argument for why we were just born into Christianity. We didn't actually choose this value system. It was kind of the final nail in the coffin, and I went basically 180 degrees. Became atheist, really rejected all organized religion at the age of, I would say, around 16. Then I get to Stanford. I worked really hard in high school, got good grades, got to Stanford, and I was very naive about what success looked like or what business looked like. I had a sense that I wanted to go into business, but my idea of business was a local restaurant or an ice cream shop, right? And then I get to Stanford and I learn about venture capital and network effects and building moats around these global businesses and investment banking and consulting, basically learning a whole new language. And I redefined my whole idea of what success meant, basically making it 100 or 1,000x the scale of what I conceived of in high school. And that led me to a deep insecurity, I think, about my own sense of my abilities and what success meant for a Stanford graduate interested in going into entrepreneurship and starting a great business. And that's where I developed a stimulant addiction, Adderall, cocaine. And these were tools at the time basically to give me confidence and to make me feel more competent, like I could keep up with the expectations of a Stanford, social climber, basically.
Right. Thank you for sharing that whole journey with us. Like, I can tell that you've been through a lot of, rough patches, but also positive ones too. And I think that every step along that way is something that formed you to be the person you are today, where you've been able to share these experiences with everybody so we can learn from them and also, be inspired by them, because it wasn't easy, I know, going through all of that. But, here you are again now. There's so many different angles to approach this. And I think maybe one way to start is by talking about your recovery period. I was looking through your materials and you describe, one specific night in Stanford psychiatric ward where you realized you had to make a change, and then you started going through all these multiple recoveries. So I'm wondering if you'd like to speak a little bit about that, because something tells me that that might be where the book idea came to you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be a very transformative time.
Yeah, so when I was a junior, I was heavily into my stimulant use. And at that point, it was, as every addict knows, there's this turning where, what initially helped you, what initially actually kind of filled that need that you were looking for, it turns dark, right? And so stimulants became my only tool, or at least my primary tool for feeling okay, for feeling normal, right? What initially made me feel better than normal was now a prerequisite for feeling normal. And what that led to was this extreme descent into isolation, where I literally didn't leave my dorm room basically for 6 weeks. I was using a ton of drugs and failing my classes. And this idea struck me. I had been introduced into cryptocurrency in 2016 by a professor who had started his own crypto network that became very successful. And the idea struck me to start my own hedge funds, investing in cryptocurrency. And that was kind of a redemptive vision where I was like, hey, maybe I'm not doing so well in school. Maybe I have this drug problem that I don't really want to address. But if I start a cryptocurrency hedge fund, everyone's going to think my life is a success. That very night, I basically went into a state of psychosis, hallucinated that my room was being invaded by mythical animals, creatures, called the police, was sent to a psychiatric ward, thankfully. If I hadn't been at Stanford, I might have gone to jail. But, that's called privilege. So I go to the Stanford psychiatric ward. I'm in an involuntary lockup. And, you mentioned too, like, for some people, that might be the wake-up call, right? That might be what...
Oh, so that wasn't quite, not yet.
No.
Okay.
Every addict has a different bottom, right? For some it's death. For some, it's getting divorced by their spouse, losing custody of their children, becoming homeless, right? Everyone's got a different bottom in terms of that moment where they can't take it anymore and they need to make a change. The psych ward was not my bottom. It was, for me, just a speed bump. I had this vision for a fund. That didn't go away. I ended up actually naming the fund after the psychiatric ward because the doctors there, they didn't believe me. So I took that personally, and I was just like, I'm going to name the fund after this ward to show them.
So then what was the name, if you don't mind me asking?
G2H2.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. It was just a random acronym for the ward. It was like the involuntary psych ward. And there was these big steel doors that said high elopement risk. And I was, surrounded by other crazy people like me. So, I totally belonged there at that time. But I was released after a few days. I basically got sober, stabilized, the hallucinations went away, and I went out and I started the fund.
Right, there you go. And then how did that go? We spoke a little bit about this in the beginning. You sent out the emails, and then what came next?
Yeah, there was tremendous interest. This was early 2017, which, if you're familiar with crypto, was kind of the first real mainstream growth of the industry. There was all these new cryptocurrencies launching. And to be honest, like, it was actually a pretty good idea from a business standpoint. It had real legs to it. And I raised money from wealthy parents of my friends at Stanford. I learned that to raise a hedge fund, you can't just take money from anyone. You have to make sure they meet certain criterias of net worth, so they're not like investing their rent money, etc. So I raised the money, found a partner, dropped out of school, went to New York, and initially the fund was actually quite successful. For the first 6 months, we were making a good money. I think the basis of the fund tripled in value or something like that, which was aligned with the broader growth of the industry. And at the same time, my addiction was deepening, right? There was nothing outside of me telling me I was doing the wrong thing. All of the validation was there. And so it allowed me to put off that point where I had to really face the demons and get better. But that time came, and it came quickly. In 2018, about 9 months after starting the fund, the market collapsed. And that big investment growth that I had seen went away. And the pillar that was kind of keeping me in this pattern of addiction, that was validating my behavior, went away. And that was, I would say, a dark night of the soul period where I became suicidal. I was facing some really deep demons within me. The drugs weren't really working as well anymore. I kind of just gotten to the point where I was just using them to get through the day. And so I went to recovery. And that was in 2018. And for the last 7+ years, that's been my life, picking up the pieces and figuring out how to move forward.
Right. So ever since then, just kind of, in a recovery stage, trying to get back to where you were. I'm wondering, you're still in crypto, or is it mainly just focusing on your spiritual evolution at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I like to describe it as kind of a circling, right? So there's
Okay.
there's kind of this point where, it's hard to articulate, but I'm sort of feeling into it, right? I have this kind of creative spiritual vision for my life that is independent of the cryptocurrency industry, but I've been, it is the industry where I have the most connections, the most ability to make money. And so I've been kind of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out for several years, just paying the bills. And then 2 years ago, I left the industry completely and moved into a Zen monastery. And that was really the point where I feel like I became what I call spiritually sober, right? Before, I was physically sober and I did have some relapses, but there was always that part of me that wanted to use drugs and I was resisting it. But with Zen meditation, intensive Zen meditation, where I spent 3 months in silent retreat over the course of a year, and I continue to go to 4 or so retreats a year, I did some psychic surgery, basically. I looked deeply within myself and I was able to, I believe, rewire my brain to the point where I no longer crave drugs. I no longer see that as a viable path or a tool that I'd even be interested in. And so that, I think, is where I was able to touch a deeper sobriety and find a place from which I could really create something that was from the heart. And that was where this book came out of, and where my current writing inspiration is coming.
Understood. And well, I think this might be then a really good time for us to segue directly into the book itself. You know, personally, first off, you put a lot of personal details into the book, is what I'm trying to say, about your addiction, about relationships and family. I mean, just as you're being so candid with me right now. So how did you decide what to include, what to leave out? Did you run things by your family members and friends first, or were you just candidly honest? It's always hard to decide these kinds of things when it comes to writing about such just the serious topics, I guess we could say.
Yeah, and the book itself is an incredible tool for healing, right? Memoir itself.
Right.
Um, when I initially wrote the first draft in 2020, I didn't have enough space from the events. And my first draft I didn't even mention my drug use. It was really just kind of an insider tale on crypto. I even exaggerated some of my success. I was kind of trying to make myself out as this prodigy that was just, had this great, wonderful experience. It was just not a true book. to be honest. That I think was a necessary step on the journey, where I took a step back after writing that first draft and really examined, like, I didn't feel like I could put something out there that wasn't true. And I ended up finding an agent, this guy Adam, who was great helped me rewrite the manuscript, helped me face some of those internal struggles. And over the course of the following 4 years, it ended up taking me 5 years. And really, with the help of Zen meditation, I was able to let go of this attachment to this successful identity and really face the truth and write the story in such a way that I think is helpful, or hopefully helpful, to those who have walked a similar path, have gotten caught, lost in the sauce, so to speak.
Right. And have you received a lot of feedback from those people who are, lost in the sauce, as you'd say, since the book has come out? A lot of times when people put out books like this, they get some emails saying, thank you so much for sharing this, that sort of thing. Have you heard anything like that yet? Or just kind of curious about that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Good.
Yeah, I've had dozens of people reach out to me over email and text, and it's been very heartwarming. And I think it's a wonderful foundation for a deeper connection with people, right? It's a tool. It's really, a memoir in any book is really a tool for letting people see the world through your eyes, and vice versa. And that's a tremendous foundation for a deeper place of connection. Now, and you did mention family, right? And that is one of the hardest things, right? Because I do write about my family, and that was a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. It was, I did have my parents read it before I put it out, and just said, hey, if there's something that you feel like would jeopardize our relationship, I'll take it out. For me, I wasn't willing to jeopardize my relationship with my family for the book. But I was lucky, I did take out a few things, but for the most part, they let me keep a lot of it in. So.
Yeah. So for any writers listening today, that's an excellent way to verify that what you're putting out there is something that is going to be beneficial, right? Run it by a few people, see if, if there's anything that should be modified, especially when it comes to real events with real people and those who are so close to you. I'm wondering also, what about the writing process itself? How did you make that part of your routine? What was the planning like, the revisions? Tell us a little bit about that. Any tips you might have to offer about that as well?
Sure. Yeah, so the first draft was really just a psychic dump, right? I wrote first draft, I think, in 3.5 months. I was just writing stream of consciousness, and I think that's a good process, right? Where you just want to get it down. And where the book ended up was way different from where it began. But having that initial foundation of a first draft, even though it was just completely different from the final, you have to start there. I think you have to start there. And I'm working on a novel now where I took the same approach, right? I just did a psychic dump, wrote a first draft in a few months, and then the rewriting, I'm guessing, is going to take, easily the rest of the year. And for God Money, for the memoir, it took 4 years.
Yeah.
Because it required some self-growth, I think, to write it as well. So yeah, it's a routine. It was the number one priority in my life for, I would say, collectively over a year, which I think is really important. I don't think I'm the type of writer, maybe some people are, that can do it on the weekends. It really had to be my full-time job for a period of time, and just immersing myself in the material and reading books that were in a similar genre. My agent was very helpful with that. He recommended quite a few books that were comps, they call it, and I think that's very helpful as well, especially after the first draft, to read comps. Maybe initially you can just write it because you don't want to be too influenced by what's already out there in the genre. But if you have a first draft down, you have a sense of your own voice and your own story, then crafting it into the genre is helpful in the rewrites by reading the well done comparative books.
I absolutely agree. That's what you need to do before you even get started sometimes, right? Reading what's already out there, seeing what you can do differently than others, and seeing how you can modify it to be, standing out amongst the sea of other books that might be in there. So it's great that you were able to do that and, to adapt it also to match that genre. So audience members who know what they're looking for can find your book also. Lots of benefits to doing that.
Yeah.
Um, so now I'm wondering, you told this story. I think you might have mentioned, did you say you're working on another book?
Yeah, I am. It's a coming of age novel, loosely based on my life, which is, I think it's really exploring the ways in which the mentors or the adults in our life, we look up to them, but they can't help but disappoint us, right? And as an adult too, like the people that look up to us as examples, we're flawed human beings. And in my experience, like I find that I can't help but in a way let people down, right? Especially if there's an idealized version of us with which they see us through, right? Children especially. So yeah, that's kind of the focus of the novel. And yeah, hopefully it'll be done by the end of this year.
Well, that's amazing. Well, definitely keep us up to date on that. And, if the audience wants to stay in touch, they've been inspired by your story, wants to know the progress of that book too, where can they find you? I'm assuming we have some websites that we can click on and stay up to date.
Yeah, you can go to deanpatrickauthor.com. You can find me on Substack. Check out my Amazon page with God Money on there.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to put those links in the description box of this podcast today. So for anybody who wants to find out more, go ahead and click on over once we're done. But Dean, I wonder if you happen to have any other tips, pieces of advice for the audience today. You've been through so much, and not only in the writing world, but in real life too. So what tidbits can we leave our audience with today as we begin to sign off?
Yeah, with writing in particular, I really feel writing is comes from the heart, right? And the clearer your heart is, the more directly you can access it in your writing. And for me, there was periods where even with writing, I was using stimulants, right? Which is not that uncommon, right? Obviously, most writers drink coffee, which I think is fine. But there's things in our lives which close ourselves off from our hearts. For me, it was Adderall and cocaine. And so that sobriety was really necessary for me to touch my heart and write from my heart. And I think for wherever you are as a writer, figuring out what it means to have a clear heart, right? Whether it's meditating, maybe not drinking as much, maybe drinking more, if you're Bukowski, right? There's, everyone's different, but for me, I think it was really finding sobriety, spending time in nature, really connecting with my deepest self, and then writing from that place.
Perfect. I like that a lot. And to anybody listening today, try that yourself. Go connect with nature, see where it brings you. Maybe you get more inspiration. Maybe you find some inner peace that can help you along with the writing process or whatever feat you might be challenged with at the moment. But no, an amazing piece right there. Thank you for sharing that with us, Dean. Hey, do you happen to have a copy of the book with you today, by the way? There it is. I love that. And is that a dollar sign with what is that design?
Yeah,
If you
so
don't mind?
when you're hiking, you'll see those like stacks of
Oh, yes, the rock stacks. I like that. Yeah, very creative.
it's crumbling.
I always like to ask, did you come up with that design yourself or did you have a little help putting it together?
No, I had a cover designer.
That's perfect.
Publisher provided that, so
I love it. And that perfectly just encapsulates the message of the book, right? It's money, but it's within, the rock, which is so, ingrained with nature, really shows the balance between the two that you explore in your book. So amazing things. I always like to touch upon that, everybody, because, we don't like to judge a book by its cover all the time, but we kind of do sometimes. So it's great to Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for all the wisdom you shared with us and your story as well. Thanks for being so vulnerable and open with your everything. It's, deeply personal, very universal though, especially, in today's day and age where so many young people are told that they need to hustle and scale themselves, and your journey shows them a new path to it. So I think it's great.
well, I hope so, and thanks so much for having me, Danielle.
Of course. And to all of our listeners, again, if you want to follow Dean's journey, you can find God Money wherever books are sold. You can head on to the links in the description box. And everybody, just remember that Authors on Mission is all about the courage it takes to tell your truth, even when that truth is very messy, complicated, doesn't fit into our culture's success narratives. This book is all about that and about the courage, the willingness to examine, privilege, addiction, spiritual hunger, while giving us all the permission to look at our own lives more deeply too. So again, everybody, thank you for joining us. Remember to apply what we've learned today to your own writing. And until next time, keep writing your truth because the world needs your story. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.